Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Todd Talk, a weekly presentation of Oklahoma Baptist University Athletics through the Department of Communications. Today, we're going to step away from our weekly coaches series, and we're going to talk with Athletic Director Robert Davenport. I'm sure there's a few things going on campus. And Dav, first of all, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. I appreciate the opportunity to get to visit with you, and I know you must have been desperate for somebody to interview today to have to go down the list to me.
No, we're giving our coaches a break. How about that? So what have you been doing with yourself up there? Nothing going on.
No, nothing going on. You know, the crazy thing about kind of where we are is we sit around and on Zoom calls and meetings and plan things, and then things change and everything you plan goes out the window and you got to start over anyway. So it's kind of like throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks and what works. And so that's kind of where we are. We're just trying to figure it out as we go along.
Things have been a little bit different for you guys this summer. You mentioned Zoom calls and a lot of meetings that you don't normally have this time of year, but you guys were actually out of the office for a prolonged period of time, kind of resetting the battery and getting things reset, I guess, as far as the athletic department is concerned.
Well, somewhat. I mean, we work from home quite a bit, and the difficult thing about working from home is we tended to do more. Put in more hours working from home, working on things than we did when we were in the office. You know, when I'm in the office, about every 30 minutes somebody walks in and has a question, and when you're at home, it's a little more difficult to get a hold of somebody. And so I would start at 8:30 in the morning at home, and then at about 6 o'clock, my wife would come in and start clanging around in the kitchen because my office was the kitchen table, and start making dinner, and I'd look up and see what time it was. I'm like, oh goodness, I gotta shut it down.
Obviously, there's no textbook, Dav, to follow what you guys are going through. I mean, you can be a veteran administrator, you can be real young in the profession, and nobody has an idea of how to handle this.
No.
How have you handled it? Have you just kind of taken the lead, or have you let other people lead and help put your opinion into things?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's my responsibility, whatever we do. But my philosophy is you hire good people and you get out of their way. And you hire people for a reason. And I'm always asking opinions and want input. And at the same time, I don't have the ego to say I've got to make all the decisions. And so from that standpoint, I try to, probably the biggest reason that I try to let other people get involved is I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and I want to make sure we're doing what's best for the university and our student athletes.
At some point, does Oklahoma Baptist perhaps go out and take the lead on this, or will every decision being made going forward be done in consultation with the league?
A good question. We had a GAC AD's call yesterday that was supposed to be under an hour, and it lasted almost an hour and 45 minutes, where we talked about, every scenario you could think of. We can take the lead all we want to, but if the conference says we're not going to play or we're going to do this, we've got to abide by that. And so, what I try to do is in our meetings and in our discussions, at least give our point of view and our input. So, we're represented. I mean, that's the best thing we can do is just be represented. And the same thing with Dr. Thomas and the President's Council and even with our representative, on the administrative committee, on up the food chain with the NCAA. All we can do is give our opinion and give our thoughts. Now, I can tell you that the vast majority of our conference schools, if not all of them, want to play sports this fall. I mean, we understand the importance of not just having the students on campus, but just the mental well-being of student athletes. I mean, they're struggling with being at home, not having the structure that they're used to, not being able to compete, feeling like they're losing out on seasons of competition and the camaraderie of their teammates and just the competitive nature of it. And so right now, I mean, if you polled our league, we'd say let's play. But the hard part is Oklahoma is probably, you see the stats of, well, we've had the highest number of positive cases in, who knows how long. But even with that, Oklahoma's rates are still lower than the East and West Coasts. And some of the Ivy League and some of the other leagues that have said they're not going to play until next spring or the second semester. I mean, I understand why they would do that. The logic is there for them to do that, but it's not there for us. And so the challenge becomes with the NCAA, at what point do we say there's not enough teams to have a championship, or it's in the best interest of everyone to push until the spring or not play at all. I mean, that's the reality of it. The Power Fives that made the decision to go just conference games, I think they did that at first glance. It looked like they were kind of caving into the, well, we've got to be careful here. But my personal opinion is I think they did that to preserve their conference, because if you eliminate all of the non-conference games, then when you have openings in the league schedule, there are going to be games that have to be postponed. There's be an outbreak, there'll be teams that can't play or whatever, and so they'll be postponed. And so that gives them the empty dates to get their conference schedule in. Whereas if you're playing a full schedule with non-conference teams, you don't have those dates. And I think that's why they did that. And I think the other Power Five schools will end up doing that as well, just to preserve their conference schedule.
OBU Athletic Director Robert Davenport is our guest on this week's edition of Todd Talk. I want to go back and revisit a comment you just made, because I'm not certain I understood it correctly. Did you say it would not be feasible at our level to play a spring schedule for fall sports?
No, I think we could do that. It would be a challenge administratively, because if you stop and look at it from the standpoint of just scheduling the games and having the administrative staff to administer the games in the spring semester, it's possible to have a basketball doubleheader, a volleyball game, a soccer doubleheader, baseball, softball, lacrosse, and football all on the same date. And I've even mentioned to our president that if it does get pushed to the spring, we're going to have to play on Sundays this spring. And in doing that, and I've even discussed this with my staff a little bit, we've had kind of some time off from hosting events, since March. And if that gets pushed to, January when we start back, we'll have a pretty long break of not having hosted events. But having said that, for the next 3 to 4 months, we're going to be working 7 days a week. That's just the reality of it. And we'll find a way to make it happen. Rescheduling, moving some things to where, we can manage several events at the same time. But, the reality of it is, that's just compacting everything into, that January to May schedule. And in doing that, my staff is going to be covered up. My response to that is just find a way to do it. If I have to, be the person keeping stats at baseball, because our sports information crew and student workers are other places, that's what I do. I've done that before. That's just the nature of Division II athletics. You just find a way to make it happen, and that's what we do.
Dave, I'm sure that there's been student athletes on campus working out this summer in their individual workouts. That happens at the collegiate level all the time. What safety precautions have you guys been able to put in to test those student athletes that are working out?
We've not had many. I know some other schools have had 70 and 80 kids on campus, and we've just not had that many. But we follow the CDC guidelines, and we do all the screening and temperature taking and all those kind of things. And so far, knock on wood, we've not had any issues. We've even hosted some camps where we do the same thing with the camps. Everybody's screened, parents included, and if the parents are going to stick around, they got to wear a mask. And we've had 2 or 3 football camps and 2 or 3 basketball camps, and so with our student athletes, we've just not had the numbers on campus to kind of point to like some of the other schools have. But when we do start back in the fall, we're going to have some protocols in place and ask the student athletes to quarantine for 2 weeks prior to coming back to campus and do everything we can. And then we know we'll have, not just in athletics, but we know the university is going to have some positive cases here and there. And I'm on the task force to come up with all the protocols and go through the CDC guidelines and make sure we're doing everything right. And I mean, there's no guarantee. I mean, there's no way you can guarantee that you've done everything right and nobody's going to get sick. I mean, you can't do that. But if we do everything that is recommended in the way that they've done that, and somebody does contract the virus, we've got protocols in place, and that's really all we can do.
I like the fact that Oklahoma Baptist has been somewhat open this summer in terms of allowing camps. What was the decision with that? Because I'm sure there's people out there that are naysayers and that you've got a little bit of heat because other schools have completely canceled theirs. Yeah. Did you lean on your coaching staffs to say, hey, do this if you feel comfortable doing it?
No, actually, just the opposite. My coaching staffs were leaning on me, trying to get permission to get started, and we followed the task force, the university task force, and CDC guidelines, and went through our phased reopening. And when we did that, one of the questions that we ask is, will we be able to do camps? And the answer from the task force was yes. We would prefer no overnight camps and no meal service, which is great with us. I mean, that works out real well. But what happened was we hit the date, and we've had some camps, some coaches just not feel comfortable with it for different reasons and cancel. And we've had some coaches say, no, we do these things, we're going to be good and do that. And I've had coaches call me and say, what do I do? And my response has been, if you want to have camp, you have the opportunity to do that. Just understand we have protocols to follow, and you're going to have to follow those protocols. If you don't feel comfortable with that, nobody's forcing you to have camp, and that's okay too. And just give them the opportunity to kind of feel comfortable with what they're doing. And so from that standpoint, I think our camps have gone well. And I think we've got a girls basketball camp going on today. And so, it's an interesting time because there are several schools that have just said, nope, we're not going to do it. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to give them the opportunity, if they felt comfortable with it and the university was comfortable with it, following all the guidelines, to go ahead and do it. Because I think we need to return to some sort of normalcy as soon as possible. And I think having summer camps and those kind of things on campus is kind of the first step. We've got a Oklahoma Football Coaches Association All-State game coming up on the 25th of July, and so that'll be our first football game, or I think the first football game in the state, this year. And so we're excited about hosting that. But we're going to have to do some things we don't normally do as far as screening and social distancing and masks and those kind of things when people come on campus. That's just part of it, and that's kind of the reality of where we are and the things that we have to do now.
By the way, kudos to OBU for allowing that all-state game to happen on campus, because those seniors have done without a lot this year. I think it's cool they're going to get to play their all-state game. Tell our viewers what precautions that you guys will be taking and maybe what they can expect if they do indeed elect to go to that game a week from this coming Saturday.
Well, right initially they'll see signs, signage, explaining the social distancing and wearing of masks. And at the gate, when you present your ticket to enter the gate, we will be taking temperatures and asking the questions. I mean, and so it'll be a slower process than normal to get in. Once you get in, we're going to ask that people social distance on their own. And because the reality of it is we can't say we're going to block off every other seat or every third seat, because when families come in groups of 4, they need to sit together. And so if we block things off like that, then that won't work. So we're going to ask people to do that on their own and social distance on their own. And we've got plenty of space. We may not have as many seats as someplace does, but the way our stadium is situated, we've got plenty of space for people to, if they feel uncomfortable being around other people, that they can still watch the game comfortably and be in the stadium.
Let's assume, Dav, that you do have football in the fall. Is this a good, for lack of a better term, dress rehearsal for OBU athletics as to how you will handle things with your own program?
Without a doubt. I mean, I don't have any doubt about that. And that was one of the reasons, kind of a hidden blessing that I kind of looked at and said, if we do this, then that kind of gives us an idea of what it's going to look like in the fall. If the fall season happens, it's kind of a trial run and will allow us to pick up on some things that we need to correct and do better. And, hopefully we do the majority of the things right. But if we do make some mistakes or see some gaps in what we're doing, then we can correct those and be ready to roll. What is that? August or September the 7th.
Yeah. Okay. A question that I have at the Division II level, unlike the big boys, social distancing, in my opinion, is not going to be a problem in the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
What the problem is to me is Division II programs don't have the resources financially to conduct COVID tests like the big boys do. So basically, at our level, it's going to be temperature checks. Do you worry about an outbreak because people can be asymptomatic?
Of course.
That being the only way you really have to know anything?
Yeah, I do. And the reality of that is, and we've talked about this kind of ad nauseum internally, and even with some local doctors and those kind of things, the testing is only a snapshot of that moment. So if you went and got tested at noon today, and then went back to work, that test is only good up to that time that you took the test. You could take the test and then go to a restaurant and pick up something to eat, be negative on your test, but end up picking up the virus from where you went to eat. I mean, and that's the difficult reality of the testing. You'd need to test daily, and I am having conversations with some of our local healthcare providers about the possibility of some kind of a large number of tests available that make them available to us. One of the schools in our league purchased a machine that they can do in-house testing, which I found very interesting, and we're looking at that. But with the hospital right across the street, I would like to think that we could somehow manage some sort of agreement with the hospital for testing. But on the flip side of that, if we test our student athletes daily, let's say we were able to do that. Well, we're not going to test the entire campus daily. Mm-hmm. So it really doesn't do us any good to test our athletes daily, because they're going to be mixed in with the student population all the time. And I think this is going to come down to really educating and getting buy-in, not only from our student athletes, but from the student population on where you go, what you do, how you congregate. And I'd like to think that the kind of the social justice, social media generation that we're dealing with will take this seriously and say, the only way we can stop this is, by doing what they're telling us to do. And the mindset of I'm 18 to 23 years old and I'm indestructible, that's always going to be there. But the reality of it is, right now the population that the virus has exploded in is kind of the 35 and under. And, we've got to get those people to understand that. And that's going to be the challenge on our campus. And I think the schools, the Power 5 schools, the bigger schools that have brought kids back and haven't had the large outbreaks and those kind of things have been the ones that have done a good job communicating that and getting buy-in from their student athletes.
I know Division II and Division I, for obvious reasons, are two separate animals. It's like comparing apples to oranges. You hear at the Division I level, if we don't have football, there's going to be athletic programs struggle financially, programs will be cut. At the Division II level, if you can't play football, Dav, is that a big financial hit to Oklahoma Baptist or to a Great American Conference program?
Yes, it will be. We have the vast majority of our sponsors and partners are tied into football and basketball. And so if we don't play football either semester, then they're going to be asking for, a refund, because they didn't get what they signed up for. And then you have, we don't generate a ton of money from ticket revenue, but it's enough that'll make a difference. And if you combine the ticket revenue with sponsorship loss, that's gonna affect what we do. We generate about $500,000 a year towards our operating budgets ourselves, and we've got good budgets from the university, but to accomplish all of the things that we need to accomplish to give our student athletes a collegiate athletic experience, we have to generate about $500,000 a year to put back into our programs, and that will be directly affected. That amount will be drastically reduced, and so at some level we need to play almost as bad as the big boys. It's just that there's more zeros on the end of their deficits than ours.
Robert Davenport is our guest on this week's edition of Todd Talk. Dav, Brian Duty does an outstanding job. He's your right-hand guy with the Stampede Club and directly coming in contact with the boosters and the ticket sales and the ticket packages. I'm sure he's been in constant contact with boosters to keep them at least apprised of what's going on, and as best up to this point.
Sure. Yeah, Brian does a great job. Is one of those kind of employees that I don't have to remind him of things, or he's on it. And we've talked at different times about the ticket sales, sponsorship sales, and those things. And the one thing that he's told me is kind of the common theme that everybody's asking is, well, are you going to play? Well, that's the $1 million question. We just don't know. And so as of today, right now at 11:26 in the morning, yes, we're going to play, and that could change at 11:27. But right now, that's where we are, and that's what we're going to do. And we're going to have challenges this year that we haven't had in the past. That's nothing new, and with guys like Brian, doing his job and doing it well, we're going to be fine. We'll figure out a way to make it work.
Okay, I have to ask you, as fans, what's the dates coming up that they need to look forward to the mile markers? Because at some point you're getting very close to fall camp starting, students coming back on campus. At what point do you have a drop-dead date to decide whether or not competition will be played in the fall?
That's a good question, Todd. I'd say our first football game is scheduled for September the 7th, so I guess that's at 7 o'clock. So I guess at 6:59 on September the 7th. We've got volleyball scheduled, I think on the 3rd or the 5th, and soccer and other sports. I'm going to be, moving forward, all guns blazing until I'm told we can't, or we have to move, or we have to change. I think we have to prepare that way, because if we don't, we're going to get caught, behind the 8 ball, trying to catch up. And I don't like that. I don't like, trying to figure out things on the fly. I think it's important that we're prepared, and it's always easy to turn the switch off. I say that it's not easy, but it's easier to turn the switch off and say stop than it is to get the motor running and say, okay, we got to get these things done because we've got to be ready. And so that's how we're preparing right now, is we're going to be ready. We're going to have our PPE in place. We're going to have our protocols in place. We're looking at roughly $30,000 in PPE that we've never had to buy in the past. I mean, we're going to have to buy $5,000 worth of rubber gloves for the athletic training room. And that's the reality of it. And the football team, we're looking at the face shields that go in the face mask. And some of those are just going to be nightmares because kids aren't going to want to wear them. And who is it? J.J. Watt said if he's got to wear one, he's not playing. And I know they can't be comfortable. But the reality of it is, if we're going to play, there are things we're going to have to do. And if people are going to be sitting in the stands, there's things we're going to have to do. One of the other things that we're doing, we're even looking at upgrading our video, our broadcast capabilities for the purpose of in case there can't be fans in the stand. We want a first-rate broadcast anyway, but if there's not going to be fans in the stands, we're going to have to charge for our broadcast, and because we are not going to have ticket revenue. And if that's the case, we want to produce a first-rate broadcast to be able to justify we're going to have to charge you for this because we haven't done that in the past.
Do you think that that's a very likely possibility, more so than at this level, canceling the season?
I think that if the three options were change nothing, not having fans in the stands, or pushing until the spring, I think the probably pushing to the spring is probably 50-50 right now. Doing nothing, I think, would be 50-50 right now. Not having fans in the stands, I think that's going to be a challenge, because if you can't have fans in the stands, people are going to say, well, why are the kids even playing?
Yeah.
If it's that much of an issue. So, I kind of think the two realities are yes or no, and then we'll have to figure out where we go from there.
Okay. I have my thoughts. I have my feelings. I'm not real hopeful. So as Pete Thamel said yesterday from Sports Illustrated, we're not playing football at any level. Might as well accept the reality. Tell me, Dav, why we should still have hope that this season will happen on schedule.
Well, I think when you look at it, we're what is today? July the 14th. So
Yep.
Today's July 14th. Our first game isn't scheduled until September 7th. A lot of things can happen between now and then, and that's why I'm of the mindset that we push forward to like we're going to play, with the hope that this thing, the curve starts to drop off again. If you look at back in April, when all this started, everything took off, and within a month, the curve had started coming down. And so from that standpoint, I think it's important that we give it a chance to do everything we can do for the student athletes, for the universities fiscally, for all the above. We give it a chance to see where it is before we pull the trigger.
Great conversation today. Always good to see you, my friend. I can't imagine what you're dealing with, because in athletics, you work on a little bit of certainty, and these are uncertain times for everyone. Good to see you again, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Todd.
Robert Davenport, the athletic director at Oklahoma Baptist University, has been our guest here on Todd Talk. We'll be back again with another episode next week. You can follow us on OBU Athletics YouTube page for more details. For Robert Davenport, I'm Todd Miller. We'll see you again next week for another edition of Todd Talk.